Well, switching gears, they fought on the front lines of the devastating European war. Now a group of active duty soldiers who are also musicians are in East Texas to say thanks. East Texas News Weekend's Bob Hallmark has more on the Ukrainian Cultural Forces concert.
At Cumberland Presbyterian Church in Jefferson, members of the Ukrainian Cultural Forces performed traditional and modern music in a free concert.
We are presenting here the very diverse music styles of Ukraine.
Cultural Forces features 7 world-class artists, professional musicians before the war, but now active duty soldiers showing their battleground injuries.
They know how to use weapons, but they've put those weapons down and they have violins in their hands, they're playing the piano.
Violinist Ola Rukavishnikov was wounded 5 times in combat and relishes being able to play again.
At some point in time, I thought that I would never come back to remain in the army forever. I see myself back to playing music after I will have returned, after I will have finished with the army. Ukraine, that it chose to fight for freedom. It chose freedom over not freedom, and justice over injustice and subjugation.
The 60-day tour across the southeast, south, and west coast is to thank the American people for their thoughts and action for Ukraine at war.
The purpose of the tour is to say thank you. This is their 2nd tour in the United States. They're here to say we're more than a country that's 5,000 miles away. We have dreams, we have aspirations.
And a reminder that their fire will not be extinguished.
Remind everyone that the war is not over yet. Put on pause their past and their present and launch themselves into the unknown future. It's our choice to fight for it, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to win. Yeah. Ukraine will be victorious, yes.
Bob Hallmark, East Texas News Weekend.
The Ukrainian Cultural Forces' next concerts will be in Shreveport and New Orleans.